Kyle Chalmers is threatening to retire from the sport of swimming. What is going on? Well, listen up for my thoughts on this topic because I got a lot to say, and I hope you really enjoy diving deep on this. Kyle Chalmers, to give you a little bit of background on who he is as a swimmer, maybe people listening to this need a little bit of context for where some of these comments are coming out of. He is a Australian athlete that has been essentially a world beating swimmer since he became technically an adult. So he was Olympic champion at age 18 in the men's 100 freestyle, which is in the context of where the sport of swimming is right now, completely bonkers. That event had been one that had moved such that the winners of it were usually considerably older, somewhere closer to 25 to 30 when they were winning titles in those events. And he came along, was incredibly good at an incredibly young age in sprinting, and has been basically at that level ever since. Been challenged by Caleb Dressel, certainly in the intervening period, but has essentially maintained, if not improved a little bit on the level that he had to win the Olympics. So this is a guy who came up to a really high level of performance and at a really young age. And to me, that is actually a key part to understanding this story, because for all of the ways in which we have learned in sport to sustain performance on a physical level, a very high level of performance, longer and longer and longer, there's also immense challenges in sustaining the mental part of the sport as you go on and on, particularly in sustaining a level of positivity and hope and optimism about what the future holds for you in maintaining that level of performance such that you're motivated to continue to do all the things you need to do to stay on that level, because it is an immense task to maintain a world-class level of swimming. It is not easy, as many of us know, and you're going to need a lot of stick-to-itiveness, okay, and resilience to continue to do the things that you need to do to maintain swimming at that level. You're going to have immense demands on your time and organization 365 days a year, essentially. And mentally, you have to feel like it's worth it, that it's good, that it's worth pursuing, and that you really want to do it. And I think when I read the comments by Kyle Chalmers, it's clear to me that is something that he is struggling with at the moment. But let me get to the article in Australian media. Well, actually, the funny thing is I'm going to read a tabloid article, and the tabloids are one of the things that Chalmers is complaining about in the first place. So this is from the Daily Mail. Emotional Kyle Chalmers reveals it took all my courage to swim after his shock press conference as he praises his teammates for their support, but he doubles down on claims he could walk away from the sport. So swimming superstar Kyle Chalmers has doubled down on his criticism of the media, insisting he, quote, took all his courage to compete on Sunday and revealing he was considering his future in the sport. Speaking after winning gold in the men's 4x100 freestyle relay at the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham overnight, Chalmers had threatened to quit swimming if false news of a feud between him and teammate Cody Simpson continued to circulate. Pop star Simpson has made an sensational return to swimming and is dating Chalmers' ex-flame, Emma McKeon. I can't stand that tabloid language. Sorry, that's an aside from me, who won 4 gold at the Olympic Games last year. Rumors of the rift have dominated the back pages in the lead up to last month's World Championship and have been the main talking point surrounding the Australian team's success. So that's pretty good background on just basically what's frustrating Chalmers at this point. He finished his race. Australia had just taken this big gold victory. And as swimmers have to do when they're at a high level championship meet, he was taking media questions afterwards. And all of the questions he took, I think I read somewhere for a period of 20, 25 minutes, were about this supposed feud, which he denies, between him and Cody Simpson. Um, this all started, or sort of started to get a lot of momentum way back at the Australian trials for this. There was a lot of coverage of Cody Simpson. Again, background on Cody Simpson. He was a pop star who had swum growing up, started to train again with Brett Hawk out in California, and started to get pretty good, get to a international level of swimming that culminated with him at the Australian trials. Many people thought he had actually qualified for the world championship team. He finished third, and you had to finish in the top two, but Chalmers was expected to not race at world championships. And then after the swim, Chalmers said, well, actually, I think I am going to swim at world championships. So this bumped Cody Simpson from swimming at the world championships, but he still got to go to this meet that they're at right now, the Commonwealth Games, where the top three could attend. And that led to tabloids to speculate that this was somehow a purposeful snub by Chalmers. Chalmers has denied all that. I think it sounds awfully silly on its face, but it's nevertheless something that has bothered him a lot. And I think if we go back to my original thesis, okay, now this is a new bit of adversity for Chalmers to uncover, because it's not just that he has to face down his extremely stiff competition in the sport. Dressel, among others. You got Popovich coming up in the 100 free, like a freight train, right? The way that Chalmers did, 5-6 years ago. And he not only has to contend with some pretty insane competition in his best events, but he also has to contend with the fact that he will be going to meets, and nominally he would like these meets to be about swimming, and instead he's going to continue to not be able to control the media asking him about what they think is going to drive traffic to their websites, sell paper copies if anybody actually buys paper newspapers anymore. The stuff that drives revenue for them, which is gossiping about, is Chalmers mad about his ex-girlfriend dating Cody Simpson, essentially. And unfortunately, this is not altogether that unprecedented when you look at Australian swimming. If you just pick your favorite Australian swim star of the last 30 years and look up some of the tabloid coverage that they've received locally, it is in many ways, despite the fact that there's a lot of interest in swimming in Australia, and that's nominally a good thing for the sport, it also comes with a lot of tabloid attention. So two of the most notable examples I can think of this in recent years, certainly Ian Thorpe, Thorpe being for several years undeniably the best swimmer in the world. And but his career ended very early for where we see people extending their primes. And he was essentially done being competitive in his mid-20s. And I have to think that a lot of the way he was covered media-wise contributed to this. He cited a lot of mental health struggles, and certainly none of this stuff happens in a vacuum, but you can imagine if you're struggling with your mental health, and I think a lot of people are familiar with the negative impact, for instance, some social media stuff can have on your mental health if you're really having a hard time with your mental health. Imagine that, times 10,000. And that's what it's like having your life covered by a tabloid. So really adverse situation for Thorpe, culminated all the way up to him having his drug test results leaked to a French tabloid. and constant hounding about his sexuality. Um, and it's actually the Thorpe's got a movie coming out that I think he was a producer on. He's somehow involved in the production of the movie, which seems to be semi autobiographical. You know, it's about a young swim star and sort of all the weird things that happens to him. Um, I don't know a lot of details about the movie as I'm recording this. Another big example, Grant Hackett, of course, Thorpe's sort of contemporary, a little bit older than Thorpe, um, for a long time, just absolutely dominant in distance races internationally. And post career, especially, he struggled a lot with substance abuse and mental health as well. And again, had to deal with going through all of that and being sort of really vociferously covered by the Australian media. Stephanie Rice, another example. So you can just go on and on and on down the line with Australian swimmers and examples of um, this happening. Uh, so, you know, without getting too specific, because we don't have all the details about what's going on with Chalmers and Thorpe, you know, I want to speak a little bit more broadly about the challenges of maintaining a positive mental state. That is something that I work really hard on in Christosantis coaching, that I work with teams on, that I work with individuals on. This idea that because a lot of elite athletes, probably the most dedicated people that I speak with, the higher level people that I speak with, the more they're actually fueling and motivating a lot of what they're doing through some inherent negativity. And that's because negativity is motivating in its own way, right? Um, if you think the worst is going to happen if you don't do something, you are very likely to do it, right? That will get you out of bed to practice, trying your hardest on every lap. Absolutely. But the problem with fueling and motivating everything you're doing with those kind of negative thoughts, which I sort of break down very basically into a if I don't, I won't, right? You know, so if I don't do this, this outcome that I want will not happen. The problem with fueling everything with if I don't, I won't is the cumulative effect of that negativity, right? It is a little bit poisonous. So it gets you the motivation you want, but it also undermines your motivation in the long term. And it especially can make it extremely challenging when you get to high level competition, because high level competition by definition is extremely stressful, right? So while you might be managing all this sort of latent negativity all right on a day-to-day basis, if you take your stress level and make it 10 times what it is, then you can easily find yourself overwhelmed by some of this negativity. So for a lot of athletes, actually, and coaches, and just people in general, um, they need to get some tools and learn to build a different motivational structure, right? Because again, if they've fueled a lot of success with this way of motivating themselves, they don't want to stop doing it, because then they wouldn't be who they are. They wouldn't be the high achieving person that they are. And that's actually, identity is extremely important to people. So if you think of, you know, everything that you've accomplished as a stack of books, you know, we need a new stack of books before we shift everything over to another one. In this case, it's building actually a different motivational structure, a different way of motivating yourself that involves actually using positive motivations to get yourself to do the things you need to do, so that not only do you have the motivation to do the things that you need to do, but that motivation, instead of poisoning you over time, is actually adding and building your psyche, so that when you come up against a stressful event, you're ready to meet it head on, that you don't get overwhelmed. And this is what I see with a lot of athletes that deal with massive amounts of sort of performance. They call it performance anxiety, but it's really just sort of emotional distress, emotionally overwhelmed states. People get into this emotionally overwhelmed state, and then they're not able to perform at their best. And I can imagine, again, if we go back to Chalmers, that, part of what he's dealing with here is that he's not enjoying what's happening. He's not enjoying competing under these circumstances. And then he's calculating, wow, I am motivating myself to do all this stuff. And essentially, by doing so, I will invite more of this uh, process that I don't like into my life. And that's an extremely challenging situation for anybody. And so I'm not surprised to hear him saying that he might retire out of all this. Of course, uh, as a fan of his swimming, I wouldn't want to see that happen. And I hope that there are people in his life that can help him through this, that can give him some support, that even if the circumstances outside of him don't change, and by the way, I would love to see them change, but being realistic here, even if those circumstances don't change, that he is able to find a way to get more positivity into his process so that when there's knucklehead tabloids bugging him about something, it's much easier for him to shrug off and move on from and stay focused on the things that are really valuable to him out of all of this. So that's my thoughts on Kyle Chalmers. Thanks to everybody for listening to this special bonus pod. I wanted to get this out in a timely manner to talk about that stuff. What are your thoughts on the Chalmers situation? What are your thoughts on the mental challenges of competing long term at a high level in the sport of swimming? I'd love to hear them. Put them in the comments below. Like, subscribe if you're listening to the YouTube version of this. Subscribe if you're listening to the podcast version of this. All that stuff really helps me to be able to put out content like this. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you again soon.